So what we are going to do for the next 58 minutes, because I am consistent about trying to get done at 2 o'clock, is talk about this pretty hot issue, this idea about inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, social justice in its largest form. And the fact is, the board has a leadership role not just to get more people on board who have differences, but across the organization. And so let's talk about the board's leadership role across the nonprofit when it comes to this. Now, the way we decided to do this session is, as you can tell, I'm a white woman. And I've been doing training and consulting and running nonprofits for my whole career. So I put together a handout on what I know, but then we're going to have people who aren't exactly like me really talk about where the rubber hits the road and how to make it even more authentic, okay? So I have about 8 to 10 minutes of workshop stuff to run through, and then we're going to open it up for the panel, all right? And the panel also means you all, because I know you have some really good experience and opinions. So when we look at the board's leadership role across the organization when it comes to the ideas we're talking about today, y'all have seen our board duty sheets in many of your workshops today, 7 essential duties of board members. And we're going to talk about how the idea of inclusion, diversity, and equity and access flows across each of these areas throughout the organization and what your role is as a governing board member to make sure it happens, all right? So that's the first thing. It's an overlay on top of every single thing you do until it becomes so much like you live and breathe that you couldn't remember ever not doing it, all right? And as we look at it, the question that we had a lot in our round table at lunch or our square table at lunch was how do you build not just a competent board, but how do you build a diverse board? So let me start there in this one. And when we look at it, somebody in the last session was talking about the matrix, the grid. Who was that? Was it Sarah? You were talking about it for, when we look at who we want to have on board, we always take a look at, do they have a passion and a commitment to the cause? And I do we have them and we need them sort of check marks. And then you have the professional expertise, whether it's management, something in your area of your mission, any kinds of expertise areas. And then, of course, when we're talking about boards, we have to look at connections to money, right? So you have that matrix. And then we can get pretty good at the thing about geography, depending on where your nonprofit is and who they serve. We start to be able to know that we want younger folks on board, maybe, in a lot of cases. And so that age thing can be, so those things we've been doing fairly good at, I would say. But and for us at the Community Foundation, it was mostly men on board when I started in 2001. So we had to get females on board. So that was our first throw for diversity. The stuff down at the bottom is the tougher stuff now, isn't it? When we really talk about how to look at sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, any kind of abilities or disabilities, race and ethnicity, and even what do you call those things, because the terms keep changing every week. Thank you very much. I'm old and I got to pick up here. So this is where just kind of starting to target what you need on your board is a place to start. And having that conversation and actually agreeing across the whole board, right? So that's the first challenge. And what I found is that too many times we've been boxed in and we take a look at what's been happening over time. And this is where somebody started to talk about it in our last session, which I love it. All these years, as we've been looking out for other people to serve on our board of directors, we always reach out to the people we know, right? Our donors, our corporate sponsors, the other people on board, who's serving on the other. And so it's the who you know thing. Who can you refer to us so that they can help us on board? And I have to say, well, of course, the social circles mean that you end up recruiting people who look like you on board unless you're incredibly intentional about it. So same old thinking brings the same old results. And I know it seems really straightforward and logical, but my God, it's so hard to do. How do you build new networks and give it the time to develop real relationships that are authentic. So it's not about just dragging somebody on board right away. It's about building relationships with new networks and new circles. And until your board agrees that it's time to really, really start, a lot of times the boards just get stuck looking the same. So it's a different way of thinking, that it's not about who you already know, but you start to think about who you need to know, what types of people you need to know. And that little shift starts to make all the difference, I think. Now, the fact is, we talked about recruiting intentionally, by design, not by accident. And this is where some very straightforward things, I think, start to happen. You know you've got to recruit affirmatively by looking for different ranges of skill sets. There's like an intersecting matrix. It's become 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 dimensional. I don't even know. We also know about you can't just bring on 1 or 2 people who represent a whole community, because you can't represent a whole community. And I have sort of a rule of 3 that I really want to try to bring on at the same time, people who are representing certain matrices, communities, in little groups, so they can have some support, so they're not tokenism. We can talk about whether that actually is functional and working. And really, how do you look at diverse networks and intentionally take a look at what's going on? And how are you sure that your boards and committees are really respecting differences? Because we all say we are, but the fact is it's really hard sometimes to not turn your back when somebody's in a social setting and you're talking with a friend and somebody new comes in and that person sees your back and says, oh my God, that group's really not welcoming because they're all talking and nobody's saying hello to me. And it happens. We're animals. We heard, right? We're wrong. So seeking out diverse networks starts to get to pretty straightforward things, again, which can be kind of difficult to do because you're starting to get into uncomfortable territory. What are different things going on in the community that you can start to go to if you're not a person who's got a diverse background, to start to learn about what's going on and to see who is being held up for pride and who is being coached along. So start to get out there into places that might not be as traditional. And it really is about relationship building. And relationships are going to take time. They take over time, a lot of time. And I would say the whole thing about tone is crucial. As I've started to really be more intentional about this, how many times people say, are we really welcoming? Or are we really, is it a place that we feel comfortable? And is it a place that we feel respected? And do I trust people, really? So to deepen some commitments, and then, as I said before this morning when you were here, I say it's about committees and task forces first. By asking people to jump on board, it's too quick, and it's not good for either party. So have people, and they can serve on committees. Some will serve for a couple of months and you'll know, some will take a couple years, but you're deepening that relationship to really decide whether it's appropriate to talk to people about serving on board. And of course, these little things at the bottom, how committed are they to what we do? What a concept, our mission. Can that person put the needs of the nonprofit ahead of their own? And you know when you get some people in committees in the organizations that their self-interests are coming first. And I would say be really careful about that if they can't put the nonprofit's need ahead of their own private, professional goals and that sort of thing. Another thing is loose lips sink ships. So a lot of times on committees and boards, you need to make sure that people can hold confidential information as such. Committees are proving grounds for that. And when it happens at a board level, it's really, really difficult to handle. So the other one is that some people are really good at group decision making, and some people get really irritated and bitchy about it, right? So you really want to see if that person is good at group processes. Or do they monopolize a conversation? Or when the group has made a motion and moved ahead, do they get stuck back there for months or years at a time? So take a look at whether that person really has an authentic respect for group process. If they don't, keep them on a committee, but don't put them on your board. Trust me. And can they serve as a strong ambassador for our group throughout the community? Do we know that we'll be proud to have them out there? So those are the things you're looking for when somebody's serving on a committee. And you can do that pretty quickly, or you can take time, whatever is right for that person. And that's the job of the executive director, CEO, as well as the board chair, as well as the governance chair. All right? So that's what I see from mine. And then again, when we talk about how to maintain relationships and people on our committees and on our boards, it's really about mutual benefit, authentic relationships, important work that has meaning, and to be happy and to celebrate some of the things you're doing once in a while and have some fun, right? So that's what I see from my vantage point. But so where do we recruit diverse leaders from throughout Chester County? There's a start. It's in your book and it's online. There's this incredible woman, Cynthia Primo Martin. Is anybody from Delaware? Do you know Cynthia at all? She's down in the Carolinas right now. But she put out this book, Recruiting, Training, and Engaging Trustees of Color. And then she took off on vacation after she retired. But she ran in Delaware Trustees of Color, which was laid down a few years ago, I'm sorry to say. So she's got some great ideas for how to start to recruit people who look different from a lot of our boards and places to start to go. And you can see we're talking large groups that we can start to develop relationships and partners with to recruit committee members. And then over time, boards members. So when I look at this, somebody asked us some kind of immediate sources, and in the middle block, you see some of those executive leadership training programs. How many of you have been through the Leadership Chester County's Board Development and Training Program? Anybody? Great program, right? Puts out a good 20 folks a year, and it's a good over a year's long worth of time to put out folks to serve on boards. And then you continue to come to things like this and our Zoom sessions for professional training. There's also a group in Philadelphia that focuses mostly in Philadelphia called Diverse Force on Boards. And it's a huge multi-million-dollar funded project. And they also click into their website, register your organization, and I don't know, maybe in a few years you'll start to develop some relationships, but at least it's a site out there. So those are a couple of leadership training programs that are right out there. And I'm sure we're going to go back and talk about other groups on this list as we go through the panel. Another thing, this is my sales pitch for our Zoom sessions. I think I've done that enough, but maybe not. Yeah. But the other part is our Get On Board program. And so you see on one part, it's about the continuing professional or development of board members. The Zoom sessions that are roundtables and trainings are on the far side. The other thing we're doing, and where's our lovely Hugh Bleemer? Is he in the hallway or is he in here? Is he lovely, Sarah? It's Sarah's husband. All right, Hugh's out in the hallway. Yeah, Jameson, tell Hugh he missed his moment. So Hugh is actually administering our Get On Board program. And so what we're starting to do is reach out to younger people and people of different backgrounds who might want to serve on committees and boards and supporting them through this lovely journey. So our Get On Board Chesco program has 25 people who signed up because of Jameson's social media in the last couple of weeks, and there's more to come. And it's an open system program where we support people by doing some virtual training and some live training, and then help refer them to nonprofits that are right for them to serve on committees, and then you can mutually decide whether the board is right for you. So we have a couple of Get On Board folks here today, too. So there's more to come with our Get On Board programming, and our partners are throughout Chester County, the funders, the chambers of commerce, all kinds of good folks. So Get On Board is a pilot program. We just started it a couple of weeks ago, and we think it's going to work really well. So that's a way that we'll be able to feed into potential committee members who want to serve on your boards. All right?
Aaron,
yes, sir.
did you say that's open enrollment in that program? Like, could we refer somebody, or is there?
Yeah, no, it's not a cohort program, it's an open system. So anybody who wants to serve on a board someday, we start to get them into that, just have them email, or there's a form to fill out. What else do you have?
Just, how does the nonprofit get connected with you to let you know that they're serving?
Go to the website, click the button, and fill out the form. Everything is on the website for Get On Board. If you go to our website at the Community Foundation and hit Get On Board, you'll find the pages about it. The nonprofit fills out a form to tell us what you're looking for, and the individual fills out a form to tell us what you're looking for. If the nonprofit is doing an intensive search for diverse board members, there's a second diversity questionnaire that the whole board and staff it gets to fill out too, and it's just online. So it's all online, and then the training is a lot going to be virtual training so that we can do it at the convenience of the people who want to serve on committees and boards. And so that's our new initiative, and it's just starting. And we'll also be hooking those folks up with coaches, so as they serve on your committees and boards, we'll get feedback and we'll help everybody to improve. All right? And we'll also offer different trainings in areas that keep coming up. So that's our Get On Board feeder program that just started. And so we have this program we put in place. I tell you what I know as somebody about how to develop relationships for serving on boards, but let's actually hear from some people who have really seen how this can work. And when we look at the entire nonprofit organization, not just who's serving on our boards, but we look on how to take a look at what we're doing ethically and legally, how to do some strategic planning and making sure we're getting diverse input, how to take a look at our financial oversight and how to do fundraising, ensure adequate resources. How do we make sure that our organization's public standing, that we're actually doing things that are attractive and positive for folks with diverse backgrounds? And when we're looking at hiring the CEO and appraising the CEO, how does diversity fit into that as well? So those are the bigger questions to handle for the panel as well. Start on this one. And I have the questions, they're in the book on page 90, 765, whatever. And so, you know what, a lot of times when we talk about it, a lot of times people say, well, where and how do we find different people to serve on our committees and boards, right? That's your first question. And then you kind of want to say, okay, what works well and what doesn't? And then, okay, what are we doing at our nonprofit? And then I say start at the bottom with some self-reflection. Are our boards really ready for more diversity throughout the entire nonprofit organization? Programs, services, marketing, fundraising. When you take a look at who you're using as vendors, who your organizational partners are throughout the community, who you're serving, who's on your volunteer committees and staffing. So the self-reflection thing is a thing I think our boards need to start. And what can be done to improve what we're doing, and are there other best practices, places we can learn from? You want to have a conversation about the self-reflection part and work your way up? When you take a look, do you think that Chester County's nonprofit boards are truly ready for more diversity? And how do you tell? I'm going to throw that out at you guys first. How do you tell if your organization's ready? How do you tell? And is the organization really ready? Can I throw it out to you, Sarah?
We're talking about it.
Take the mic so they can hear you.
Oh, no.
You're talking about it is good.
I mean, the first thing is we are talking about it.
Okay.
So we've noticed
Sorry,
The-
my hip just went out, so I'm going to stand like this.
the lack of diversity
Okay.
in,
Awareness.
yeah, and that the population we serve is much more diverse than we are, and we'd like there to be more similarity.
Okay. All right. You want to add to it, Amy? You're good for the moment. You got your, wait, what is that? Yeah. No, I don't want your cookie. I'm not going to take, all right. So first is awareness. We're actually talking about it and making some motion here. What else you got? Anybody? Do you have anything up here? Way back there. Can you yell so that Chris can hear you? Are you going to be my runner? What's your name, sir? Patrick's the runner. We're taping this for our Get On Board program. So Patrick's our runner.
Thanks, Patrick. Hi. Have we done any work as an organization in diversity training and anti-racism? It's one thing to see that, oh, everybody's white. It's another thing to see that, you know, we're a diverse human race.
So the training, Good. Thank you. Patrick and Mimi's the runner now. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. How do you see the boards and the groups that you work with taking a look at diversity across the organization? What do you see? I'm throwing this down to you guys. Go for it.
Hi, everybody. Too close? Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Emily. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an attorney in Kennett Square. I've been lucky to be on a couple of boards, and I think the places where I've seen it work the best often do start with this awareness piece that we've just heard about. And oftentimes, or I'll say, the example that worked the best was actually where the board was pushed to be aware by the constituency that they served, getting more and more diverse, and by staff in a situation where it was a nonprofit with staff, also becoming more diverse and realizing, gee, we got to keep up. And knowing that the organization was getting stronger because of the diverse constituency and the diverse staff. And that the organization was growing, and by growing, we were reaching more and more folks. And so it was easy then as a board to say, gee, we got to keep growing, and we need to start with ourselves. And so that speaks to what this other friend mentioned, which is starting with anti-bias, anti-racist initiative at the board level, and a commitment to see that through to all of these other initiatives that the organization was working on. But knowing that it started, I don't like this phrase at the top, because that's also not really a way of thinking about diversity in my mind, but starting with the board at an executive level commitment. And then just to, I'll stop talking soon, but the piece that I think was really helpful for this particular organization was we then really brought ourselves to a place where we could be open to actual feedback about this and how well we were doing, and invited into an annual meeting where it was not a confidential session, but invited into an annual meeting, a wonderful, really engaged constituency, and invited all sorts of folks, but folks who we had been serving came in and provided some feedback on some of what they heard in our governance session, and reflected to us some inequities that as a board we had just sort of been merrily going along the way things had been done, and hadn't realized how out of balance this was, and inconsistent with our goals of becoming an equitable, just, anti-bias organization. So hearing that feedback and being open to it was an important step for us, and so and I do think it really started with the board's readiness to take that critical feedback.
How to be open to it? Think about that. To repeat my phrase.
Karen asked how to be open to that feedback. In this particular organization, as I said, we knew that the growth of the organization depended upon our ability to keep up with our diverse constituency and diversifying staff. And that the board were folks who had been involved 10 and 20 years ago in a constituency that now looks very different. And so I think there was some good awareness there, and there were some younger board members who said, we're going to miss the boat if we don't really take a hard look at what we're doing. And that's the whole reason everyone was there, was to keep obviously being dedicated to this organization and moving it forward. So we did some self-reflection at board meetings, had a retreat about it, then engaged a consultant to lead us through some anti-biased, anti-racist work at a corporate level, and then had feedback from current staff about how we were doing as a board. Tried to reimagine all of the programs that we had through an anti-biased, anti-racist lens of saying, are we really providing the work, doing the work we want to do for this constituency with these important goggles on, and then tried to get feedback from our constituency as well. So it was a many-step process that I'm sure I've bored you all with now.
No, not at all, not at all, not at all. Keith, want to say? Do you use yourself, please do?
Oh, sure. Hi, my name is Keith Burress. I'm the board president of Orion Communities. Hi, everybody, again. And I think I'm going to start with the question one, which is the self-reflection thing, about are we really ready for more diversity throughout the nonprofit orgs? And I think, unfortunately, I feel the answer is no, not really. I feel that the starting point is the training of the board, and we've talked about this, and that process is a long process, and even though we love our boards, everybody on our board is not about the process. Does that mean that they can't be on the board, or we shouldn't continue the work? No. But it means that as ready as we may think we are, we're really not. And not only that, our staff aren't all the way there either. It's really important to walk people through a process. And this process takes time. I mean, we could talk about wanting more diverse folks in our organizations. It doesn't mean, just because you have someone in the org, doesn't mean that it's a healthy place for that person to grow, to feel sustained. And that's really what we're talking about. Let me take it back. That's really what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a diverse workforce, a diverse workplace, a healthy workplace, where we can have every person feel comfortable expressing themselves and their ideas and thoughts, and not feel othered in the process. And the other part of this is it costs money to actually have an outside organization come in to do this work. And many organizations may not have the budget to do it. And we try to do our best and get by TED Talks and having group talks. I won't say it doesn't work, but it makes it's very difficult to do it that way. So there may be, maybe that what we need also is a way to get organizations funding to do the work if they really want to do it, and have that be a normal process as opposed to a one-time thing. Because this is not a one-time thing. It takes time, it takes energy, and it takes leadership, and I think that's. And so again, that's why I feel that we're not there yet.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I am Natalie Ortega Moran, and I'm a building principal in William C. Lewis Elementary in Wilmington, Delaware. But I spent much of my career in education in Chester County, in Westchester, and over 17 years in Avon Grove School District. With respect to whether or not we're really ready, I think that the first person who spoke really said it very well. The fact that we're even having discussions shows that we are definitely making a step towards getting ready. It does begin, especially when we think about the population that we're serving. So our communities are becoming more and more diverse, and yet the boards, the nonprofit boards, may or may not be moving towards that diversity that reflects the communities that we're serving. Are we really going to have likely productive outcomes then? We have to have the same representation at the board level that represents the communities that we serve. In addition, though, it does begin with conversations and that awareness, right? So that awareness that could be that maybe that big step, and I brought this out in the last session, is you have to try to break through that, right? You have to try to break through that. And that first step is accepting that you will be placed in an uncomfortable situation, but you will not learn or grow unless you are placed in that situation where you are learning about others who are different from you and accepting that difference. And that's really where the diversity piece comes in. It isn't, and I'll say this again, but it isn't about just checking a box or counting numbers. You know, how many people do I have that are African American or Latinx or different gender orientation and so forth. It is about including them, and that's where the inclusivity comes in. And I know that this is coming up later on, but that's how you retain people, is when they feel valued and they feel that they have a voice in what you're doing and at the table.
Sure. My name is Timmy Nelson. I am retired, so I have all kinds of time. I'm a 30-year UPS employee retiree, and I just love community involvement, and that's why I'm here. I agree with my panelists, partners, no question about it, and I'm going to ask you to exhale for a moment. So take a deep breath and exhale. Okay, now say to yourself that because we don't have a diverse board, it's not my fault, but it is my responsibility to fix it. Okay? And that's what happens. Anytime I have a diversity conversation with people, one of the first things I try to share with them is that I'm not blaming you for anything. This is not your fault, unless you don't take steps to correct it. You know, so, and some of us may be thinking that, you know, well, yeah, I've done this, that, and the other. Well, keep doing stuff. And we're going to talk about some of those things you can do. But this is a self-reflection moment. This is a moment where you look at little things that your organization might be doing. Say, for instance, you have an event where you invite people from the outside to your event. And we have a tendency as people to just kind of all stick together because we're all the Chester County Community Foundation people. We're going to all talk to each other. We know each other already. All right? So that circle that we have shouldn't be a circle, first and foremost, okay? So when we have those groups we invite into our facility, to the Lincoln Building or wherever we want to have conversations, to talk about things, we have to show ourselves as being open, right? So the circle becomes a you. So that when someone else is talking, someone else is around you, they're invited into that you, not closed out of that circle. And that's what this is all about. This is all about saying, in our self-reflection moment, what can I do, not the board do, what can I do to try to find ways to have a more diverse population that represents the people that we truly serve?
What can I do? Let's go back. What can I do?
So, first thing you can do is say, okay, who do I know in my circle? Okay? Who's in my sphere of influence? Okay? One of the first things I learned when I became a management person at UPS, they set us down in these spheres of influence. Anybody ever done that? Spheres of influence? Okay? Yeah, so you determine, okay, within my group, who do I influence? Who's in my group? Who do I have a conversation with? And then the whole message behind that process is, how do I expand my spheres of influence? So if you're talking to the same people every day, all the time, about the same things, you're going to get the same answers. So if you extend yourself and say, who else can I reach out to? Who else can I pull in? Who else can I have that possibly uncomfortable conversation with? Then that's where you start to expand things.
Anybody want to add? And maybe you better be a runner in case we have more ads. Do you want to add to it while we just run for somebody? Natalie? I'll take that one. You keep the one with the square on the bottom. I'll take that one. Oh yeah, Sarah's got a question. Danger.
So my organization is faith-based in Westchester, and I know that there is a long history of racial divide amongst the faith organizations in Westchester, and I don't know whether I need to address that first. It's huge.
Yeah, you got answers here.
I don't have an answer for that, but I'll just add. I mean, I think Martin Luther King said that the I'm going to get this quote wrong, but you can help me with it. Basically, that the church hour is the most segregated time. So work again. I think Timmy's on point where it's not about getting your church to do it. It's about you doing it and someone else doing it. It's an individual thing. Trying to move a church. I'll just stop. It's an individual thing that you need to do. And Timmy said it really clearly. Work, do it yourself. If you have 2 other people in your church that maybe want to do it. And again, there are other ways to do it aside from moving a church. And sometimes by you doing yourself outside the church sees that and will come on board. And so don't. The church is too heavy to drag. Don't try to change the church. Work on yourself. Work on your friends. Work on your sphere of influence, as Timmy's talking about, and reach out in that way.
Can you pass your mic down to Timmy? It may be the same. It may be different. What do we think?
I agree. It'll be an addition to that. Okay, and I'll share this with the entire group. For any field you're working in, I challenge you to find a group that's not in this case, Black Ministerial Alliance of Westchester. We can connect you with that group. You can have a conversation with them, and you can say, here's what I'm trying to do. Can you help me? Okay? So, and that's for anything, for CPAs, for attorneys, for anything else. You will find a Black, you will find a Hispanic, you'll find a, you name it, you'll find it, okay, that fits that group. Takes a little research, but they're out there, trust me.
Good point. Good point. Yeah. Anybody else want to add to this? So can we keep talking about where and how do we find and develop diverse relationships? Or is there anything on your mind you want to talk about? Go ahead, Natalie. What's the one that you're burning to talk about?
On here,
Sure. Or anything.
the number 3.
Sure.
Yeah, number 3, the mistakes that
Yeah.
are made is the assumption that one person of color or one person of a different sexual orientation has the answer, because they don't, or they may not. So it also puts a lot of pressure on that individual to try to provide their own perspective to a bigger audience. So I would caution that just because you reach out to somebody and you want them on your board or you want them in a committee, that they're going to be the know-how for everybody else. I'd have a conversation to make sure that they're comfortable with that, number one, because, and it's happened, I'm sure it's happened to all of us, that we are of a certain color, of a certain background, and then the assumption is, you know all about your background. No, you don't. You learn as you experience things, but you don't necessarily can be the spokesperson for who you are.
Good point. Anybody want to add to that? Or mistakes made in cultivating, recruiting, retaining, and what can we do about it?
Just wanted to add to what Natalie said, that that's also a quick way to burn out anybody that you've worked hard to try to pull in, and asking someone to shoulder the burden of everybody, of bringing a board along, is not quite right. And there's a difference between drawing people in and including them and being accessible, and then relying on them to effectively unpaid labor lead your whole organization through an anti-bias, anti-racist training module. So make sure that you're, as you can, seeking that out professionally and including the voices of a wide group of folks, but not relying on them to do the hard work for you.
I think the other thing is showing up in community. It's when you're seen in a community and you get to know a community, it makes a major difference in how the community sees you. Invite people to those events. That, again, I think Timmy talked about this, or someone talked about this earlier. Getting outside of our circle We tend to invite the same folks to all of our galas and fundraisers. Invite the other folks who you never invite, and give them free tickets. Help them get there. I mean, sometimes it's about, we say, well, we invited XYZ organization, and they didn't come. Well, again, sometimes you need to help people show up. Friend raisers all the time. And again, you need to show up. Whether it's, it's really important to make that example, especially if you're on a board. It's important for you to lead as a board member with what you want to do, how you want to show up, and how you want your team to show up. If you're not doing it, why should they do it?
Another factor is trust, and I'm going to lead into this trust factor real quick here. On the 15th of September, we had our first IDEA Council meeting. It's inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. Okay, and we had roughly 20 people join this call, and it's a cross section of our community. I mean, we have elected officials, we have people that work in daycare centers, and everybody in between. Okay? So one of the comments that was shared by one of the participants was, and she shared her story briefly, and then her final question was, and I want you to think about this for a second, all right? This came from a Hispanic lady, and her final question was, can I trust you? Okay. When incidents happen, and this is something that's passionate for me also, when incidents happen, whether they're racial, whether they're gender, whatever it is, organizations tend to want to put out statements and say, we are opposed to this because of these are our company values and what have you. That's wonderful, okay? But what's more important, the statement or the action? Okay, I think we know the answer to that question, all right? So when she asked that question, can I trust you? She's simply saying is that, okay, you're saying you're going to do this IDEA Council. You're going to focus on inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. You're going to focus on those things for everyone in our territory. But are you really going to do it? Because I've heard that story before. And that's a story from a minority, okay? Because we have heard that story before. Now, I'm going to go back to my previous statement. I'm not blaming you. But I am asking you, are you willing to help resolve the issue?
Good point. So I know there's comments. Mimi, I need you to do a run. Myra, right? Yeah. Can you introduce yourself if you're comfortable with that? You can go in the middle too.
Thanks. Good morning. My name is Myra. Spanish, it's Mayra Castillo. When we first walked into the room, Sarah and I'm the vice president for Casa Guanajuato Kennett Square, and Sarah is the president for Casa Guanajuato Kennett Square. We're a nonprofit cultural organization in Kennett Square that has been around since 2003. Next year is our 20th anniversary, so we're here so that we can learn more about organizing boards, so that we have funding to have an actual place, so that we're not homeless. We say we're casa, but casa means home, and we don't have a home. So Casa Guanajuato has been homeless for 20 years, and we think that it's about time that the Hispanic community that belongs in Kennett Square is about 50% Hispanic now, and there are other areas, southern Chester County, that are 25, 30%. And it took me almost 30 years. I've been in the country for almost 30 years. I was not born in the United States. I was born in Mexico. It took me almost 30 years to recognize and say, I belong here, thanks to another opportunity for another leadership training that I attended last year through an organization in Kennett. And I asked Sarah when we first walked in, I said, can you count how many Hispanic women you think are in the room? Because it's something that I look at all the time, regardless of where I go. And a lot of times when I go to conferences because of work, I tend to be the only Latina or one or two Latinas. And it's more often than not, it's me and somebody from Puerto Rico or somebody from the Dominican Republic. And sometimes someone from the Dominican Republic who is also Afro-Latina. So it's somebody who is Black and Latina at the same time. So, you know, she or he represents two other ethnicities. And this sense of belonging that took me 30 years to finally accept, whereas before I used to say I don't belong here in the United States because I'm not accepted because of the color of my skin. And I can tell you stories of really, like, it has happened where I've been to hospitals and people assume that I don't speak English because of the color of my skin. And people tell me to my face, do you speak English? Really loud. And I'm like, yes, I do. Actually, I also speak French and Portuguese and other languages. How many do you speak? And so this sense of belonging, we talk about this idea, it's inclusion, diversity, equity, access, and then we have to add the D in there, that sense of belonging. If I feel like I belong here, and if I feel that sense of trust, then then it doesn't feel like a burden. So I really have to thank Karen and her team for inviting me to be part of this idea and this coaching. Because I also have to thank Natalie, who's part of the panel, because when I first met Natalie, she was one of the assistant directors at Avon Grove High School, which is the high school that I graduated from. And for me to see a Latina in a leadership role was the first time that I was like, oh my God, there's a Latina in a leadership role that is huge. So then I could see myself and our younger children in leadership roles that I had never seen before. And so, like, everywhere I go now, I'm like, can you work on getting more Hispanic nurses, more Hispanic doctors, more Hispanic lawyers, more Hispanic of everything? Because it's a growing population, and we need to be able to see ourselves in those roles, because if we don't, our children are going to continue to not see themselves in those roles. And how unjust is that? That it took me 30 years to live in a country that I'm a U.S. citizen of, and I vote, and I, finally said I belong. So how long is it going to take for our children who are also born here to finally say, I do belong here? And those children who speak English and who may be from mixed families who, because of the color of their skin, still feel like they don't belong or are told that they don't belong. Exactly, and don't speak Spanish either, and then they feel more embarrassed because they don't speak Spanish, and then there's that whole other, issue around that. So it's a sense of trust, and it's a sense of belonging, and if people feel like they belong, and again, going back to what Natalie said, I always say my nationality. I was born in Mexico, so no, I don't represent people from Puerto Rico, from the Dominican Republic, from Colombia, from Peru, from Venezuela, from Ecuador, from every other country, because it's a completely different country. Just because we speak Spanish doesn't mean we have the same experience. I mean, I'm different than my brothers and sisters, so that should tell you about yourselves and how different we are. So no, I don't represent everybody. And as it's obvious by my accent, you couldn't tell what I was unless I tell you. So thanks.
I'm just Debbie. I'm Debbie Bookman. So I'm Chester County Prothonotary, and I am also a part of the IDEA Council. And I just have to say, I appreciate Karen and the Community Foundation so much because, sometimes being out in the community and being parts of different boards, I hear a lot of comments, right? And I'm the type of person, I'll hear what you say and then I'll go evaluate myself. And it's the complete opposite to what I've heard about the foundation. And I appreciate, it started I used to attend the luncheons, the hour luncheons, conversations, which were great. And what I've learned is that the Community Foundation doesn't only talk it, but they do it. And I thank you for being that beacon, because I'm also on another DEI committee, and they're stuck. They've checked the box, so we're together. And then they started saying, well, what are the holidays? Let's go through the calendar. They marked all the holidays off. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, where's this going? But they don't know where to go. So my question is, I could say a lot, but they're not ready for my mouth or how I feel, and I only represent Debbie. So my question would be maybe they aren't ready. I think they think they're ready because they're receiving that expectation, that the pressure of expectation from the community, but they don't know. I think that they think just saying that we have this is enough. But it's very frustrating to me as someone on the committee because I don't want to become that angry person, right? Or I'm trying to make it too much of this. Or we were talking about equity in the, the environment. Yeah, that's a part of it, but what else? And they have all the right puzzle pieces, but don't know what to do. So my question is, maybe I can bring something back to them. What would you suggest? How do they get ready? Because they want to be ready in their minds. So you kept saying, Timmy, my brother, it's not my fault, but it is my fault if I do nothing. So I feel that everything happens for a reason, and me being chosen by Karen was a reason. So I want to take that back to them. So what can I bring back to them?
Well, that was a direct question, Debbie, wasn't it? No, great question. So here's the deal. If any group that wants to start a DEI council, okay, my first question to you is why do you want to do it? Okay, and here's self-reflection again. Am I doing it because it's expected, because that's the trend in the country right now? Or have I recognized that there's something that we need to correct? And for each organization, it's going to be different. What do you need to correct? Okay, I sit on a number of boards, and I've had conversations with all my board presidents from time to time, and we talk specifically about what do we need to do to make this organization more welcoming to everyone. Yeah. And so we talk specifically about who we need to target, what groups we need to target, what initiatives we need to take on, where do we need to be present, So the question I have to ask is that, and Deb, you and I can talk all the time. I can help you with that, okay, specifically. But the bottom line is that what do you really want to do? What do you see as your issue? Because if she just came up with a DEI statement just because it's a trend, then you're on the wrong track already. So that's my response.
We're going to help you. Speak your truth, yeah. In the back.
Yes, hi, I'm Kelly. Keith said a little earlier about it's an investment, and then Timmy said that it can't just be the statement. And I was at another training, and they said that your budget is your moral compass, I think, or your moral statement that you're really going to make an investment. Is there room in your budget and in the work that you're doing that you're going to invest in making changes? So I just thought it stuck with me, and I thought it might be something that sticks with you as well. So I just wanted to share that.
And the budget is also about, and this is kind of maybe outside of it a little bit, but how we respect our staff and how much we pay them. That's the other part of this. I think that a little bit. And so, yes, again, there needs to be budgeted, a piece of your budget that's for DEI. That's what you're really about. And Timmy has said it really clearly. Everyone's not really about it. I mean, and people may want to just check a box because they have to or they're forced to. And again, I don't pretend to know anyone's heart or their boards, but that's a question you guys have to ask yourselves. And again, that'll be your answer. You can figure that out. But I know you.
Yeah.
Yes. Can you talk to the whole room?
Sure.
I know you can.
Maybe I'll step over here, and I have to bring my little tablet because I don't really have a concise question or comment. I consider myself a young man. I'm 47, and so the fight for equity and diversity and inclusion and access for me has been a lifelong struggle. So it's hard to sort of, I'm sitting there and it's like, today has been a wonderful morning, very informative, but the ideas and the feelings are lifelong and sort of all over the place. But Bill and I, we had a nice little chuckle after one of the sessions. So it's uncomfortable, right? We talk about these uncomfortable conversations. And it's uncomfortable in many ways and for many different people. I mean, I as a black man in a boardroom full of, where I'm the only black man, it's difficult for people to hear what I'm saying sometimes. And it's just as equally difficult for me to speak and to have these difficult conversations. And so when we put it back on ourselves, so we have a room full of leaders here, and this idea of the change starts with you. So to develop this appetite for the uncomfortable conversations, for the difficulty, for the challenge that it's going to take in order to change. And the change is going to have to happen within. So for me to develop that appetite for the discomfort, for me to develop the need to speak and the need to do the work that doesn't turn off when I leave the room or when I clock out and things of that nature. Are these organizations ready? There's another point of contention, because who am I to say that your organization needs to? You might feel like, no, it doesn't, right? One of our workshops was about fundraising. And so in the cost of doing business, right? We want to get the most money as fast as we can to do the programs that we need to do, but is diversity a part of that equation, or am I trying to raise as much money as I can? So those were some of the concepts that I felt like I was squirming in my chair that I wanted to share, but don't really know how, because it's not that buttoned up in a nice little statement. Everyone lives this, and the diversity and equity and inclusion and access struggle is a struggle that we all share. We all share it. It's not something that because I'm a black man that, scared of the police or something, I'm the only one that has that struggle. It's a struggle that we all share. So thank you for putting it back on each and every one of us to include this in every aspect of the work that we do, just like how we include fundraising and everything else in the aspects. So thank you.
See it as your truth, not negative. Well, see it as negative. See it as your truth. Because it's not negative. It's just your truth. You're speaking what you believe. Period. In the story.
You are speaking your truth. It is. It is. Now, I hate to say it, but it is 2 o'clock. And I know things are always going to get interesting, and that is how this is. And in a sense, there's no summary, and as you said, Ajane, there's no little, neat little ending on this one. This is a process. And I would like to thank you today for investing in this board development leadership process, and for really all the work we're going to be doing together over the coming years on inclusion, diversity, equity, access, social justice of all kinds. And so for the self-reflection, when you feel like your organization is ready to have that conversation, reach out for some help, because I think we want to make sure that we can have that and get that to you. And we want to really make sure to make your work and your volunteer joy as board members to be as inclusive and as impactful and as joyful as possible as you make this world an incredibly better place. And there's no more important time than now. It just seems like throughout my history in my last 60 years, things are really coming to a head again. Urgent. There is an urgency. Timmy, you have to add something. And I would love for Timmy to close us out. So please do.
Thanks, Karen. I have a request, okay? And I'm going to ask you to step outside your comfort zone for this request. I have had the opportunity to speak to a number of CEOs about diversity, equity, inclusion, and the first question they always ask me is, what do I do? And the first thing I asked them, I said, do you understand what active listening is? Okay. So here's my request. If you're embarking upon this social justice diversity journey, I'm going to ask you to find someone of a different ethnicity that you've heard about the issues that we deal with, okay? And I'm going to ask you to, in your own way, ask them for a conversation, ask them to share with you their view of things that are going on. And active listening means you're not trying to come up with an answer for them. You're just trying to process some of the stuff they're saying to you. I can tell you the folks that have done that, when I've asked them to do that, they have come back, in some cases with tears in their eyes, because they said, I didn't know. I had no clue. I can tell you horror stories that I've gone through since I've been in Westchester. And you know what, and I say this not boastfully, but I retired as a senior vice president and managing director of a major organization. And I've had people in law enforcement, even in this case, say things to me and do things to me that have just been despicable. But because I had a grandfather that trained me what to do when people said the wrong thing to you, I'm here to talk to you today, okay? All right? All right. But I encourage you, I ask you really, if you're sincere about social justice, diversity, equity, inclusion, find someone from one of those groups and have a conversation with them and say, what's it like to be a Hispanic person in the United States? What kind of questions do you get? What's it like to be a person that's differently abled in the United States? What's it like to be a black person in the United States? What's it like to be a person of a different gender in the United States? And how does that impact you? But it has to be active listening, and you'll be amazed at things you're going to find out.
One step at a time. Anything else for the good of the order? Go out and do amazing things. Please keep in touch. Thank you for everything.